Hi, welcome back. I'm joining you all from Hendersonville, Tennessee, just north of Nashville. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to be joined momentarily by Nicholas Garbis of One Model. We're going to talk about ethics of AI and ML in HR. Need another acronym in there? We'll find one. But before we do, I just want to acknowledge what's happening in Ukraine, and there's a lot of sources to donate and get involved. And having lived there for several years, it's something that is top of mind with my friends and coworkers who are in country. So my heart goes out. Please stay involved, whether it be through your company and voting with how you purchase product, or get involved in a way that you feel comfortable, but please stay involved. When we talk about ethics, it not only relates to people, data, and analytics, it relates to everything that's happening in the world. So with that staging, I'm going to bring Nick on, and we're going to have a discussion about what's happening with people, data, and analytics, and AI, and the ethical challenges that ensue. Nick, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks, Alan, and thanks for calling out the situation in Ukraine. And I know how much that means to you, and from your time there.
Well,
So appreciate that.
thank you. And we've been friends for a long time, and something that we have long discussed is, hey, we're getting all this data. Whose data is it? It's people's data, although organizations are making investments in these technologies that are capturing the data. So there's this blurry line, and that creates some ethical quandaries, not only around the math or algorithms that are employed, but the actual data collection itself. So I was really excited when you let me know that you were working on this project to create this white paper and have some guiding principles and processes to help organizations actually do something about this, not just have an intellectual conversation about it, but actually do something about it. So if you would introduce yourself and a little bit about this white paper and your approach.
Yeah, thanks, Al. And I'm Nicholas Garbis, VP of People Analytics Strategy at One Model. One Model is a people analytics platform. We help to get data off of people's HR or companies' HR systems, integrate it, make it available for visualization and for AI ML predictive modeling. And that's the reason is that I'm involved in this topic is because we are building out products like this that uh, with use that data, use AI and ML, and we're doing it in an ethical way. But that allows me to spend time on this passion project, Al, as you mentioned, something about how we use data and the concept of people data for good, which I give credit to Al for really coining and promoting. That's really centered to this. And I'll just kind of tie it back to where we started many years ago as we were both kind of maturing in this space. The ethics was around what data you had, and it was really like, can we touch that data? Should we be getting survey data that is confidential or anonymous? What are the quandaries with that? Can you show details, or should you cut it off at 5 responses? There's a lot of things. Those were all ethical decisions. I think now, and what has brought about this surge of interest and passion, you know, my behalf and my co-author Taylor Clark, is that we have these tools like AI and ML. They're not just inside people analytics teams, but they're embedded in all these HR products. And the concern is that these things are being pushed out and sold a lot without the companies that are buying them having good frameworks for how to understand what they are, to manage them as assets that are really powerful, but also need a lot of care. I guess in the context we're in, this is like like nuclear arsenals. You have to have people who are trained that monitor these things and are watching them because they're significant. The nuclear power plant is a great thing. It creates a ton of electricity with little bits of pellets of stuff, right? Okay, but you have to be able to manage that. So that's what we're talking about, is like, what are the principles and the processes that are going to ensure the outcomes are ethical? So we're taking things from data security and privacy and now ramping it up with all this superpower analytics. and trying to say, how do we manage that now and who's going to do it?
Yeah, and this affects diversity, equity, inclusion. It affects retention strategies, hiring, all the above. And again, this is something too that is not only the privy of large enterprises now. If you're a small, medium-sized business and you're acquiring a technology that's going to capture people's data, not understanding or having guidelines and frameworks to understand, how the information is collected and in turn used is, not only putting your organization at risk, but again, there's an ethical, quandary there that needs to be elevated. And I know you have a few slides that you want to share as we go, but I'll let you and follow your flow here. But I really am intrigued about, number one, the guiding principles, but the processes, because when I read the white paper, it's not esoteric. It actually is like, oh, I can do this. So with that, please.
Yeah. So I think that was the point of the way we wrote the paper, and I am intolerant as when it comes to just the point in time at which all of the high level frameworks. Everyone's still talking about like the overall. There's two types of things you'll read about AI and ML. One is like it's great, it's powerful, it does all these magical things. And then you'll read another layer of stuff, which is it's dangerous, watch out. But what's missing is that next layer down, and this is where I was really focused with Taylor to unpack this down into principles and processes. And then each of those we unpacked enough that people can start to figure out what are they going to do. So we're not being completely prescriptive about that. In fact, Taylor could, and may be writing an entire book on the specific statistical methods, the analytical methods that you should be employing to understand if you have bias in your models. So there's a lot of technical methodology in that, and that is outside of my domain of expertise, and so that'll pick up from with what he's compiling. But yeah, let's pull up these principles, because I think number one, and I have to apologize, I didn't get my laundry done on time, or I would have my people data for good socks on right now. So because I was awarded those once. But yeah, so I think AI ML needs to be deployed for the benefit of people and society. So you've got to think outside of your company. So this is just kind of foundation for people analytics. The concept of human in the middle, that if you're letting the machine run from step to step without putting a person reviewing things in between those steps, you are setting yourself up for unethical outcomes, unethical processes. So your process of building AI/ML, the process of building the stuff has ethical requirements as well. So having that human in the middle. The third principle is valuing understanding over deployment, and the concept that celebrate failure. We went out to build something, it didn't work, and we failed, and what did we learn, right? That this needs like a bold underline under what did we learn, because in other types of failures, when you're trying to launch a product or something and it doesn't work, you're going to learn certain things. But if when you're building a predictive model, the learning is a huge part of the value of that, of what you're doing, because the model itself is trying to replicate and help you understand the intricacies of a system. And it's a system of flows of people in and out, and then there's inputs like learning, there's inputs like manager changes and organizational things, and then how does that impact you? So you're trying to understand the system. And as you're building a model that's looking at all types of data from that system, you're going to see things and they're going to teach you things. If you get to the end of the line and the model is not sufficient to deploy, meaning it does not have the performance requirements met, or it has bias in it, what did you learn along the way? So that is where valuing understanding really is key. You have to think, every time I find out that something is not related to the likelihood of promotion, that's a piece of intelligence I've just gained. Even if I find out something is like, there's no correlation here. Mm-hmm. You just learned something. So the whole process needs to be centered around what can we understand, and are we taking all of those learnings along the way? They're not just byproducts like, scraps of cardboard that just need to be cut out in order to make a shape for something that can fold up. There's value. It's a different thing. We're not talking about I don't know. It's like more like blooper reels than cutting room floor stuff. It's like there's good stuff there you can learn from, and it's not just for entertainment value like the blooper reel. But you get the point. The stuff that doesn't work out is helping.
Well, hey, Amit, how you doing, buddy? Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. If anybody watching or listening has questions, please enter them in the chat, and we'll do as I just did with Amit's comment. My question here is, I'm tempted to ask you for an example, but then that might just suck up all our time. But the thing that I want to ask, when we talk about ethics, people get scared, or privacy, they get scared. I don't want anything that's wrong. Hey, I don't want to uncover that there is bias, because then we're going to get in trouble. But to your point, it is about learning, and there needs to be that openness to learn, and legal needs to get on that bus to say, hey, yeah, we're going to find stuff, but we're going to be prepared as an organization to take appropriate action and remedy that bias. But if the work is never done in the first place, then how can an organization improve? Thus, the ethical.
Yeah.
So again, what would you say to those who are a little hesitant to do anything on the ethics front?
I think that conundrum, especially with legal, and any of my legal partners that might see this video will remember some of our conversations I've had about, well, we need to look at this. I think it'll help to have this is sometimes these things happen in co-working spaces.
That's hard.
Anyway, there's you've got having the processes in place are the best thing that you can do to be able to have that conversation. So you build your processes, and then you use those with your legal partners, and then with that in mind, you'll be able to have those constructive conversations. So that's really I'm gonna like shift my view a little bit. It's all good. It's distracting for me because just so. But the point is that you have setting up these processes and doing it and building those with your legal partners is going to be the best way to have that conversation. And yes, you need to have that. This is the world requires courage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, we're seeing courage at a massive scale in Ukraine. All of us have, smaller acts of courage that we need to do, and that means like doing courage is standing up to do the right thing, and the right thing is not to bury your head in the sand. So having these processes of what are we going to do, walking through with legal, what are we going to do if we find something like this? Just do some dry runs with them. What if we find something like this? What is that? How are we going to handle that? And I guess another thing that, and my legal friends will kind of just cringe at this, but I would say to them, I want to understand the topography of the risk, like a picture of the landscape of the risk with the curves and the mountains and valleys and stuff. I want to know something. Give me like 3 cases that have happened where this has been an issue. I just give me some case law. Let me take a look at it, because I can't just operate as a people analytics practitioner, especially in getting into AI and ML and ethics. I can't operate without some real pictures from the, what's the landscape. If you do this, you're going to slide downhill. Right. Do not go over here. This is dangerous. So we need to have real conversations, and that's our work is not just quantitative. It is very, very much interpersonal. Anytime anybody's doing something at the edge of change, you're going to need to think about the emotional impact on others. It might be that you're asking someone to do something that they weren't doing, adding work, so you have to figure something else out, change the way they're doing something, or look at a risk through a different lens. So any of those things that are happening, that's really really going to be important to navigate that. So we're navigators as much as we are analytics people.
And what you're sharing, and I know you have some other visuals that you'd like to share, so I want to make sure we get to those. But when you're talking about talking with legal and others, there's a level of governance that needs to be employed, and that governing body, committee, whatever it might be, needs to prioritize these discussions. It can't be just up to the vendors to do the right thing. That we need, as from an enterprise point of view or an organizational point of view, a position and a plan, to your point. So I'll just call that out. And,
Yeah.
do you have anything to add around this notion of governance and prioritizing these discussions, albeit they might be messy and sometimes confusing?
Yeah, the conversation has to start. So who's going to be the courageous person to start the conversation?
Mhm.
And whoever's listening, please, that's you. I mean, just you don't look around. The whole HR tech stack is I would say vulnerable when you have distinct buyers. People buy this technology or that technology. There's with the AI and ML that's being like baked in some cases being really pushed to the forefront of the selling process on these things. You need to have some way of looking at that stuff. And if everybody is buying it, you need to kind of centralize that intelligence in the organization and those efforts, because you can't depend on each person that's evaluating, trying to select technology to be equally knowledgeable. And even if they were all equally knowledgeable about this, you still need the power of all of you coming together and saying, what do we think? Let's process this together. Is this going to be a good solution for us? Do we understand the ethics of this type of thing? Do we understand how this model is working? What's the level of transparency we're going to have? What assurances do we have that if the model has drift, the quality of the model is dropping over time? Is this vendor going to keep us current on that? So there's a number of steps, and these things are laid out in the white paper. I think I'll maybe flip over to the process side of things for a second.
All right,
Just let
let's
people
do it.
get a look at what we're recommending. And when I say we're recommending, it's more than the one sentence that's beneath it. This is essentially like an outline of the what you'll find in the paper. But having a screening process for ethics and value, looking at the use cases. On the analytical side, it is in the moment evaluation, having the processes to do the analysis on an ongoing basis. Now, some of this you're going to be formulating and figuring that what you can get from a vendor, and some of it you're going to do on your own. It kind of depends if you're working with your models that your team builds, or the models that are embedded into some solution. Number three is what we were just talking about, which is having some manner of having portfolio management, so keeping track of what you have, know how it's performing. When's the next time we're going to review the candidate recommender in the recruiting system? What's the cycle with which we're going to open that back up? So knowing what are all the AI/ML assets that are there, managing them as portfolio, and then this stakeholder and issue management includes the legal team. It includes all of the HR tech owners. It includes the employees. So being proactive and communicating about, we understand that we are using some of your data in these ways, and this is what we're going to do about it. And then what is our plan if there's an issue? What do issues look like? We were just a minute ago talking about with the legal team. If something goes wrong, it might look like this. What would we do? If you're not prepared right now, let's just say if your company is not prepared for some one of your tools that has AI/ML baked into it, if you haven't already done a little bit of a dry run on what happens if that thing blows up and is on the front page of the news, what does your company do? Are you ready to help that? Do you have do you know who's going to be in that conversation? This is really being ready to manage the issues is part of being a responsible owner of something this powerful.
Yeah, you see Amos quote here. There's a famous quote: "Analytics without action is overhead." I don't share that point of view. I agree with Nick that we learn something always. With that as a staging, I want to focus on that point four for a second. It's the case where you mentioned it's you who's going to start the discussion. However, people analytics is emerging as a discipline. There are, as we well know, there's people analytics jobs all over the place. There's a gross undersupply of talent to do this work. Most of the people, I think, based on my anecdotal evidence, are coming through technology or analytical disciplines. They're not coming through legal disciplines very often. Sometimes they have economics backgrounds, such as myself and Amit. But here's the pointed question. If I'm IT or CIO or someone who's dealing with technology selection and implementation and enhancements, I might think that, hey, that's in my bailiwick. That's something that I will do. People might say, well, we're actually doing the math. We're doing the distribution of the insight. That's really in my area. What I'm seeing, it's falling through the cracks. It's like a hot potato, so to speak. And it's something that, again, there are discussions, but rarely are there initiatives that are ongoing and sticking. And I believe that the trend is that it's happening more and more. But here's my question. Whether it be the organization, small, medium, or large, if there is an owner, someone who's ultimately responsible for improving the ethical confidence, if you will, of the use of people, data, and analytics, who would that be?
Almost every firm has got somebody that's looking at risk. Enterprise. It might not be framed as enterprise risk. It could be safety risks. In financial services, it's going to be financial modeling risk. So there's so I think that the hot potato is one side of things. The other side is a territorial fight. I think you have to go in and say, who here would have to be involved if something went wrong? Who would care? Who would need to be involved? That would be your initial committee. So if there's if this blows up, I mean, stopping short of the CEO, but you would have who's going to care? The head of risk, the head of IT, the head of HR. The head of HR is going to have like internal comms, your communication, marketing people. I mean, so just picture running some of those exercises through. Each organization is different. Some of them are going to respond better to fear, and so you might say, "Look, let me just give you a sample headline. This just happened." By the way, you can go and make there's news generators online where you can make a CNN headline. I've made some fake ones before, so you can make like a little crawler at the bottom. But you have that conversation. What would we do if this happened? Who should own this? I think if IT wants to own it, great. You're just if this is related to the HR technology, you've got to be there with them. But ultimately, someone needs to be owning.
Well, we only have a handful of minutes left, but I want to ask this from a very practical standpoint. So the more we talk about it, given we're covering talent acquisition, we're talking about compensation, total rewards, we're talking about engagement, behavioral data now with O&A, and just a general ability to the digital exhaust that workers are creating. So there's a lot of data, there's a lot of things that can be really cool, and there's a lot of things that are at risk. So once you pile it all together, it's like, damn, this is a full-time job. So do you believe we're at a point where this can and should be someone's job to focus on the ethics of people, data, and analytics? And to add on to that question, if it is specialized work with specialized knowledge, would it make sense to partner with somebody who already has that, whether it be a service provider who has an established expertise, or potentially a technology that can help audit not only the data that's being collected, but the algorithms that are being employed as well? So I know that was a big question. I'm just curious your thoughts.
I believe you're right that it is that big. I also worry that if we walk in with it being that big, that people may react by shutting down all sorts of really good stuff and saying like, wow, really scary back in the box with all that stuff. And then you limit the value that can be created. So I do think it's certainly could be a person's role at a company that's 10,000 plus people. It could be a role. could be a
Mhm.
role within, but until that time, it could be done at sort of a committee type of approach.
Mhm.
Could be part of someone's job. It can be maybe a project manager has one of these things that's on their remit. So yeah, I think we are getting to that point, but I don't see it happening just yet. When we do get to that point, we're going to be in a lot better shape because those people are going to be able to refine their skills, collaborate with others, just like early people analytics practitioners were able to do
Mhm.
when this was new. You're by yourself. So this, and in terms of like a technology to help evaluate it or services, it's 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 tricky because this is something that outsourcing this might make you comfortable that it's being done, but it's really difficult to outsource reputational risk. It's always yours at the end of the day. So I think this is something that I would not really. I think you want to have the capabilities inside. If you have the capabilities to build or employ an algorithm, then you need to have the ability to evaluate algorithms.
Yeah.
So
And so, as we start to wrap, you and I have long talked about the value of an ethics charter. So, taking these guiding principles and ways of doing things and communicating it outwards to key stakeholders and potentially to the whole organization. So, you have a position. What are your thoughts there?
I believe in that completely. And when that conversation started, I think it was before so much AI/ML was just being embedded in. I mean, my original kind of thinking on ethics charter was for our people analytics teams. And how are we going to use the data of the employees, and how are we going to communicate that? How are we going to be transparent with people? So that's that was how are we going to process data? Where is it going to go? How what's all of those things. And now this is bigger.
Yeah.
So it's part of that. I think we've just expanded this further, and things like transparency are key in this. In fact, one of the principles was maximize transparency, and I think this is true in the AI/ML. It's also true through any of the other people analytics that's being done. How do we? Something I can scroll up one page. There we go. So how do we generate trust? And this is for it's for all those uh, different elements of people analytics. So yeah, so that's look. I'll just close by saying like I feel very fortunate to be working with one model where this matters to us, and I um, am able to use that to to pull together resources to create the white paper, which the link was shared before, and to drive this forward because I believe in this practice that we are all in, people analytics, and I think that we are very likely the only data scientist organization or only team that has data scientists within HR, and therefore we have to think about how we apply those skills to kind of stay with the people data for good, to make sure we remain ethical as we advance our practice.
Well, Nick, thanks for doing what you do. Get those socks washed. Get them back on again. Hey, how can people learn more about you and what you're up to?
LinkedIn is the best way to find me. Happy to have discussions to be, you know, brought into online or something to speak to your team to emphasize more. I just really highly recommend reading the paper. I mean, I have a lot of stuff on my reading list. It's not that long, but we really need to start to dig in on this. Happy to receive your comments on it. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find One Model at onemodel.co on the interwebs. And yeah, we're happy to have conversations about people analytics or ethics.
All right, Nick. Hey, thank you again. Appreciate you. You stay warm up there in Minneapolis. We'll see
I
you
stay warm every day except for a few minutes in the morning when I try to get really cold.
on. Follow Nick on other social challenge if you want to know what that meant. It involves cold water in the mornings. You are
Yeah.
you are a very courageous man, shall we say? Going back to that. All right,
Great.
Nick. You be well. Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.